Week 2 of LCS is in the books, and a lot of people getting really excited for some teams, getting really worried about others. This week, J&T and I will give our take on whether we're buying or selling the standings, and we'll explain what that means in just a moment. Also, we talk about what did we learn this week from CLG beating EG, and is SPICA back to his MVP level? May have some varying opinions there. We will get into that. This is episode 90 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and J&T 250. J&T, what did you think of week 2?
It was good. Obviously, Cloud9, you got it back a little bit on track with the 2-0, bit of a sketchy game against Dignitas, but honestly kind of whooped 100 Thieves. So once again, 100 Thieves is that lone team in the middle at 3-2. There's 3 teams above them. The rest are below them. There's no other 3-2 teams. They're a nice little middle of the pack team.
100 Thieves is the top lane of the standings on an island by themselves. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought on Saturday, the first day of games, I was like, man, last week the games were so good. I remember being really impressed with the first week, and then I didn't think the games were that good. I thought they were entertaining, but I mean, from a skill level, I didn't think the games were as good this past week as the week prior. I still do think that Sunday things started to look a little bit better, but definitely thought week 1 looked better than week 2, and I was like, oh man, I was so happy last week. And then, yeah. But again, the games were still really, really hyped. There was lots of absolute bangers this past weekend, and so we should get into those. Do you want me, or do you want to explain the whole buy, sell, hold?
I think you should explain it
this week. Okay, so it's we've done something like this before. We're trying to make it a lot more simple. We looked at the standings, and we said, are these teams better than the record? Or if we think so, then it would be buy. So, for example, we're going to be starting with CLG. They are 4-1. If I thought that they'd finish with a better than 80% win rate, I would say I'm buying. If I thought they'd finish with about similar, I'd say I'm holding. And if I think they're going to be worse than the 4-1 record or the 80% win rate, I am selling. Just to make things pretty simple. So I guess let's start with CLG. J&T, are you buying, you holding, or are you selling?
Well, we're selling, unfortunately. I know CLG, they're kind of off to the dream start. I mean, when you think of CLG's tenure in the LCS ever since pretty much they were last victorious in about 2016 when they won the back-to-back championships in 2015 summer and 2016 spring, it's honestly been a pretty steep drop-off. You know, CLG really hasn't been in the championship conversation, let alone kind of the top team conversation, and if we want to go even further than that, the playoff conversation, because they're often, not really making playoffs. They've kind of become a bit of a bottom dwelling team in the league, and just kick off the summer split starting 4-1 with a roster that is pretty much exactly the same from the previous split that they finished 8th place in. I think, if you're a CLG fan or if you're CLG yourselves, you got to be pretty happy with the start. However, with CLG, they're 4-1. Yes, they are 4-1. And yes, they did beat Evil Geniuses. And that is a really big accomplishment in terms of their trajectory, in the league.
Absolutely.
However, they still have a pretty tough schedule ahead of them. They did get a few layups early on in the season. And honestly, their loss against FlyQuest, it's kind of just like one that got away from them, because people may not consider CLG, a bottom team when it comes to this season specifically. But when you play those games against FlyQuest, against teams that should be in your similar skill level, you need to beat those teams. And while, we can commend CLG as much as we want for being 4-1, and that's good on them, losing that game to FlyQuest when you are looking so good is actually going to be, might be very detrimental in the future.
It feels bad because there's a lot of hype around this team, not even just for being 4-1, but this team shouldn't even be 3-2, for example. No one would be surprised if this team was winless or at 1 win at this point in the season. So they go 4-1, and it feels bad to just shit all over it and be like, I'm selling. But let's be honest, there's no fair chance that there's almost no fair chance that any team should win 80% of their games in the season. So it feels like they're kind of put in an unfair spot from us in this particular topic, but obviously you got to give them the sell here. The other thing too is you just mentioned that they lost to FlyQuest. It's like, okay, well, even if they beat FlyQuest, now they're 5-0 and we're still selling anyways because, well, they're not going to keep a perfect record. So it's like, this feels like for CLG and this particular topic, they just can't win when it comes to this, right? But when you look, let's talk more specifically about how they look different this split versus last split. Okay, look, I admit I was a big time doubter, and I still am to a certain extent, but I don't think they're as bad as I would have pinned them before the split started. They definitely look better in certain areas. First place you got to look at is contracts. How bad was contracts last split versus how much better he looks this split? Now, he still is inting every once in a while, but the thing is, you need to be fair and consistent with the different players that int every once in a while, because if it was Blabber, we'd be like, oh, haha, he does it every once in a while, and then he carries games. Well, Contracts is actually having some really pop-off performances, specifically in the EG game. He just one-shots Danny in a random team fight, and is like, oh, damn, this is freaking Contracts. This is not the same guy we saw last split. So even though it seems like we're both very pessimistic on the whole Cell thing, I think we both have to say that we're probably very optimistic about what this team is doing and what this team can do throughout the split versus what we thought they were going to do.
Most definitely, because I think a lot of people had this team pegged as a bottom team, whether that was last place or even second to last place, because from the majority of the power rankings that I saw around the league, whether it was our own or whether it was, on the dive or even on the broadcast itself, the majority of people had CLG as either the 10th place team or the 9th place team. And, to say that was an unfair assessment before the season began would be incorrect, because they had
yeah, it was fair.
They had looked like there had been nothing done to prove to us that they were going to be better than they were. And yes, the move for Dokla over Jenkins was definitely, I think everyone agreed, a move in the right direction, because Dokla had been improving so much in academy, obviously won Champions Queue, but nobody thought that this move was going to push them to where they are right now. And I wouldn't even say that Dokla solely has done that. I think what we've seen out of CLG is just better individual and team play as a whole. It's just, you can see the players, they're laning better. I'll give a little bit of credit to Palafox. The first 5 minutes of his laning is still not very good, but he's not getting shit on in lane anymore. He's not getting blown out of the game, 10, 15 minutes into the game, racking up 3-4 deaths in the early game. He's actually playing pretty solid. Luger and Poom are continuing to play solid. And you just mentioned already, there's this less flippiness out of Contracts, where he's trying to go for these massive plays, which can either win or lose his team in the game. And it's just some smooth gameplay out of CLG. And I think that's what's brought them to the 4-1 record.
The aggression is still there.
Yeah, the aggression's still there, but it seems more calculated than just, I see enemy, I go right-click enemy.
100% agree. The one area where I'm still a little bit cold on Palafox, honestly, just because in most of the laning phases, now, laning phase is not everything, let's be honest, but in the laning phases, I've noticed he hasn't had prio very often. He is down in CS quite a bit. But again, to look at laning, it's difficult to do, because I feel bad because I'm probably going to do that with a few guys this episode, but it's difficult to be like, oh, this guy's laning is good or this guy's laning is bad after 5 games, right? But I guess going off of data from last split as well, I do think his laning phase has carried over to be not the greatest either. But I want to get back to the conversation about the aggression, not specifically with Contracts, but in the game that we saw this weekend against FlyQuest, there's a fight in River where things go pretty bad insta, right? That's where Johnson picks up a kill on the Twitch, and then Takui on the Ari ends up picking up a double kill. And that fight, I actually didn't mind them taking it because they had prio. So last split, I feel like they would have taken a fight where they don't have prio from their bot lane or something like that. And this time their bot lane has prio, but the way they got pinched was honestly well played out of FlyQuest. And so it was I could see both teams going for that fight, whereas if this was a fight last split, I feel like it's CLG just taking a fight they have no business taking. So that's where I see some improvement there. The other area is the top lane. I think no doubt can you say that they have someone who's going to win their lane on a regular basis, where it was Jenkins kind of just sat there and slowly lost and never really made anything happen. And so that's where I think the biggest changes for CLG is specifically, obviously, the top lane where they made the roster move. But in the laning phase, they are winning lanes sometimes. That matters a lot, and that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the reasons I'll circle back just to why I'm sort of selling CLG, even though I've thought that they've actually played very, very well, was something I mentioned right at the beginning, is their schedule has actually been a little bit favorable. 3 of their next 4 matches are against, perceived very strong teams, the 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, and Cloud9. And sure, people can say, Cloud9 shouldn't be viewed or shouldn't be put into the caliber of those teams because they're 2 and 3 and they're in the middle of the standings right now. But Cloud9 is most definitely a team that'll give CLG a very difficult outing to try to beat. So once again, I wouldn't say it's a huge it's a hot take to say that CLG can easily lose all four of those games. And the one is against Immortals, so that definitely is an easy and winnable game. But in a world where CLG loses 4 games in a row, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
So I want to do this just for CLG because I think they're kind of in the, like I said, they're in the unfair spot where it's like no one should ever expect this team to be able to keep this record up. So it's obvious we're selling. But let's get a little bit more specific as to where we think they should be by the end of the split then. Like where would you classify their skill level as far as like what you think their end of the season record will be? And if you want, I can go first on that, or you can go first. I don't
Yeah, I
really
mean,
care.
they're probably hovering somewhere between a sixth, I mean, anywhere between a sixth to seventh place team, in and around there. I guess I would say six plus or minus one, so high five, low seven.
So what is that for their record then? What would you? Because if you usually finish sixth, what is that, like 8-10 kind of thing?
No,
Because they already have 4 wins.
I mean, I don't know. 8 and 10 might be that's
It's
fair, I
it's
guess.
crazy to say. It's weird to think when you word it that way, right? Because it's like they already have 4 wins, but 8-10 is usually around what you get when you're at sixth place, right? So I actually think that 8-10 or 9-9 is a fair assessment. Because I still don't think they're that great, but 9-9 or 8-10 is still a that's a much improved team. What were they, 6-12 or something last split? Like that's a big improvement as far as win percentage goes.
Yeah, and I definitely think, and I've mentioned this before, that when you're a team who's struggling, the games at the beginning of the season are the most important because it's when teams haven't built up their synergy. Teams who, in Cloud9's example, they had a bunch of visa problems and wasn't even practicing with their entire team up until this past week. The wins early on in the season matter so much for these bottom teams, and for
They
CLG to
do.
pick up 4 wins in the first 5 games, albeit against weaker opponents, but those are matches that they should win if they want to sort of push up into the upper bracket of the league and actually contend.
And like we mentioned, they beat EG, which is a big deal. I guess I kind of said all the things that I wanted to say about CLG, but we did have it in the title, and we did ask the question, like, what should we learn from CLG beating EG? Is there anything that you wanted to add to answer that question, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of already said it before, but you can kind of just see individually the players seem to have, a little more confidence. And I think that is
Mhm.
sort of reflecting in their team play, which is also, looks a lot better. Um, it's just the whole look of it right now is just trending upwards for CLG, which is a great thing for them. Do I think that, they have the potential to sort of push into the top four, top five come the end of the split when, that's really when we're talking about teams, you really want to be on the uptick when you come into week 7, 8, 9 and about before playoffs. So I think CLG, they have their work cut out for them if they want to stay up there. But I think they have the potential to do it from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, we learn. I guess the one thing that I could say that I could add on from what I've said already is we've learned that one player switching in this roster is enough to make the team look completely different. And look, I still, yeah, I know I'm still saying like I don't think that they're that great of a team and that they're probably going to finish around 500 of a record being around 9-9. That's still an accomplishment. And the last thing that I'll say, it's an accomplishment because they're all really young players to be specific. And a lot of them are just academy players like really not long ago. Um, the one thing that I'll add on to the whole topic is I mentioned how like he looks really good in lane. The one weakness that I have noticed is like he has been having a lot of isolated deaths. Now, some of those you could say are warranted because like he's dying while he's split pushing, but his team is grabbing a turret on the other end or something like that. And so that's like a little bit of, it's not like he's just dying uselessly, but there are still a lot of moments where top laners will learn to back off and their team will still get that objective on the other side of the map anyways. And so that's something, a little bit of an area where I think he can improve, which is, that's even saying something, saying like this team looking at 4-1, and there's still like an area that I think is pretty simple to improve, like just not overextending isn't that big of a shakeup to learn. I think that we're still to see better things out of Dokla, so that's pretty exciting.
Mm.
Evil Geniuses, next up, also 4-1. They took the L to only the team that we just talked about, CLG. What are we doing? Are we buying? Are we selling? Are we holding, J&T?
Well, there's no image, so that means the hold. Means we're not doing anything.
Okay.
Um,
Um, yeah, go ahead.
well, with EG being 4-1, yes, they did lose to CLG, and when you're on the evil geniuses side of things, that looks pretty bad because they're CLG, and Yes, they were looking much better. They were 3-1 going into the match, but it was just kind of surprising actually to see EG lose that game, mainly because both comps were kind of, they were straight up team fighting comps. EG had the better comp, most people would argue, going into the game with the more poke oriented Corki and Ezreal, and we saw in a ton of these late game team fights when it came to positioning around objectives, we saw EG do a ton of work with the Ezreal and the Corki in terms of poking off CLG in a lot of these fights. But credit to CLG, they just kind of made the game as messy as possible, and the Gwen just kind of existed on them in the late game and one-shot Danny and JoJo in a couple of those last team fights. But for CLG to beat EG kind of at their own game with this team fighting comp, and making the game chaotic, was the most surprising part about the whole game to me, rather than EG kind of faltering. Because they had the Corki, the Ezreal, and this is a comp that EG has been great on, since Spring Split, when we saw this sort of poke Corki build come out of the woodwork to basically just be one of the best, champions in the game past 40 minutes. But apart from the one CLG game, they're still taking down everybody. So, I mean, EG's still looking really strong. I think we expect them to be a top team in the league, whether it's top 1, top 2, and maybe at the worst, top 3. Because, the other teams don't look so great either.
So I almost put the sell sign up for this team, and it's not because the reason why I ended up keeping hold is because I do think they're a top team. Even with the loss to CLG, I still think that they're looking pretty good for the most part. And you could also argue that they were really freaking close to being 5-0, and that's some copium for sure. But yeah, I mean, the Elder ran out in the middle of the game-ending team fight, and I saw, I think it was Inspired that maybe it was JoJo, I don't remember. Somebody on EG tweeted out like, "Man, I kind of got distracted in that team fight, not realize I was wondering why they weren't dying." Because Elder ran out in the middle of the fight, and that's that's a very rare thing, so I could actually see that being very jarring and distracting. But anyways, still, they could have almost finished 5-0, and yes, that's some copium, but at the end of the day, this team is going to be a top team in my mind, and so I ended up going with the hold, because it's like, 80%, that's a tough win rate to hold, but I still think that they're one of the top teams in the league, maybe the top team after TL looking a little bit weaker this past weekend. So I kind of just hesitantly gave them the hold sign here. But I was kind of back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, the premier matchup for Evil Geniuses is going to be probably when they play Team Liquid. I think that's going to be the first litmus test in terms of deciding who's the best team in the LCS, with both of the teams sitting at 4-1 at the current moment. And, their series from Spring Split in the playoffs where EG 3-0'd them, obviously TL is going to want the revenge there. So I kind of see EG, the way they look right now and the way they're playing, I expect this to sort of continue throughout the rest of the split. But like I said, that TL matchup is definitely going to be the one that sort of sticks out and should stick out in their minds as well, to sort of reaffirm that they're the best team.
So I don't think that they're out of the woods yet as far as the MSI hangover thing is concerned. My reasoning for this, and that doesn't necessarily even mean that I think it will happen, but the reason why I think it's possible it could still happen is because on Hotline League last week, Vulcan did talk about how they kind of still played a lot. Mind you, they didn't scrim that often, right? But they were still playing a fair bit because they were worried about coming out of the gate really slowly. And it made me realize this weekend that loss to CLG actually matters a lot, because Vulcan was saying something about the going 3-0 really helps them take it easy. Those wins matter so much that they don't have to continuously grind. One of his worries was that if they have the MSI hangover and they come out slow out of the gate, then they have to really grind to keep their record up, and then that could really lead to burnout. So it feels like with EG, every win or loss matters that much more because this team didn't really get a long break. And so if they pick up a couple of losses in the next couple of weeks and they still have to grind to keep their record up higher, then I'm a little bit more worried about burnout. Which is really strange. It's a weird way to look at it, because it's oh, they're winning, so oh, they lost a couple of games, so things must be doomed and they're going to be burnt out. And it's well, that doesn't exactly always equal that, but it is very possible that burnout can still happen as the split goes on. And I'll remind you, even though there was no MSI in 2020, C9, everything was cruising along for the first half of summer, right? They smoked everyone in spring. there wasn't even an MSI and everything was going great for the first half of summer and then just fell off a cliff suddenly where like it really seemed like they ran into some burnout. And so I guess what I'm saying is that it's still possible, even if it's not likely, it can happen.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll have to see sort of how the meta develops right now, because this is definitely sort of an EG favored meta with the sort of late game scaling that we've been seeing in a lot of these games with these, very late game powerful champions like a Gwen, like a Corki, like an Ezreal. And for whatever reason, if there's another big shakeup in the meta, whether it comes to playstyle, champion picks, or whatever, EG initially seemed to be one of the teams that benefited the most from the change at the end of spring. So we'll have to see, should there be any changes, how that affects EG, and what other teams that could work out in their favor.
Yeah. And just before we move on, just a couple of players I want to talk about from this past weekend. I thought even in the loss to CLG, I thought Danny's Ezreal still looked really, really good. That guy just lands a lot of skill shots, and when you're playing Ezreal and you're landing a lot of skill shots, that is going to be, well, you're going to be putting out a shit ton of damage. And so that was something that I noticed. Even in some losing team fights, he was still putting out a lot of damage. So I wanted to shout out for that. Yes, he did get picked after like the whole, he stuck around in the enemy jungle too long.
He got Gwen.
That's something that he'll need to fix. The one thing I will say is that it didn't end up leading to anything, but that doesn't mean it's not a mistake, right? Because there are times where that he's going to get picked off like that, but Baron will be up, or Soul or Elder will be up. So like that mistake kind of happened at a lucky time, maybe because there was no objective up. So that's something that he's going to have to worry about. Last thing that I want to point out in the Immortals game, Jojo Pyun saw Ignar flanking. We talk about that all the time. Probably going to talk about Ignar flanking a little bit more later. And just went right after him with the Sylas and forced the Alistar, being Ignar, forced him to use the ultimate. That's like a really important play, realizing, look, the only way this team engages on us is if the Alistar gets to us. Rather than waiting for this guy to flank, I'm just going to go up and force him to ulti because he was like 6 levels up ahead of him. That was a really smart play out of Jojo Pyun, and I don't think we would have seen that at the start of last split. So that was a smart play by him, and I wanted to call that out as well.
Let's go, Jojo.
Team Liquid.
Yep, Team Liquid.
Not looking as good as not looking as good as they did the week before, did they?
Hey, you have them on the sell. I have them on the hold.
Yeah. I still think this team is going to be a top team. But I am worried that we're seeing the same similar signs that we saw last split, where like this team could look really, really good, and then all of a sudden they could look not so great. And I think that's what we saw this past weekend. And so I looked at the 4-1 and I thought, they could have even lost to FlyQuest that game. So to me, I'm looking at this team kind of like a 3-2 right now, and that's, I guess, a 60% versus the current 80% that they actually have. So I don't think they'll be able to sustain 80% win rate. Even though coming into the split, I would have had TL higher than EG. I've kind of swapped that, and I think EG is currently the better looking team. So I guess I gave them the sell for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the tale of 2 weeks with Team Liquid, and the first week they came out, smashed everybody 3-0, didn't look close, and then they had 2 very, competitive games this weekend, losing to TSM on Saturday, and kind of scraping a victory on Sunday against FlyQuest. Yeah, I know that Team Liquid didn't look very good this past week, and it was to their benefit that they ended up beating FlyQuest. FlyQuest had a little mini throw. When they were up, the 3 dragons and about 5k gold, kind of just made a few individual errors in terms of their positioning, and Team Liquid just kind of ran away with the game. It seemed to be just one guy died, and then another guy died, and another guy died, and then Team Liquid was in the base, and then they died again, and then the game was over. So that's always kind of a weird way to lose, and it's really difficult to judge the team who just won because you were losing and you were behind for the majority of the game until your opponents continue to make these kind of careless mistakes. But they're still 4-1, and I think I'm still going into this summer split with the expectation that Team Liquid is going to be contending for the title, and they are going to be a number 1 and number 2 seed in the postseason, and that's partially because they had a really good week 1 and they started off 3-0. And you look at a team like Team Liquid in comparison to Cloud9, who already has, TL did beat Cloud9. Cloud9 started off the first week 0-3, and Cloud9 basically has to climb their way back up to the top of the standings if they want to get into that range of TL and EG, but they're already, 2 wins behind. So Similar to how CLG is benefiting from starting off the first week 3-0, I think Team Liquid is also benefiting because they don't look like a super dominant team, at least not as dominant as EG is, when they are facing off against these lower tier teams. So at the current moment, while I do think that EG has the higher ceiling than Team Liquid from what we've seen so far, I don't think that's really taking a whole lot away from Team Liquid because I still think they're a very strong team. They have everything that they need to win. It's kind of just all about putting it together, and I'm not really ready to say that they haven't based off of 2 weeks, one where they destroyed everybody and one where they looked fairly average.
It's so difficult to judge a team when they look as clean as they did last week and then look as shaky as they did this week. A few things to talk about. I guess I wouldn't have expected them to get solo killed by TSM in the bot lane. 2v2 killed, I suppose I should say. Although you kind of got to give credit to TSM's bot lane. I think they played that really well, so some credit there. But there are some other mistakes that don't really make sense. Like against FlyQuest, for example, Santorin goes into River to contest Crab, realizes, oh shit, this fight ain't for me, runs into the pit, and then greeds his flash forever. And he admitted on in the interview post game, I just need to flash out there. And yeah, he does. But that's still a mistake that he should not be making. He should know there's no way he's not getting out of that pit unless he flashes. So holding that flash just kind of lured his team into a fight that didn't help. CoreJJ took a really weird path towards helping him as well. That kind of just got himself caught in that very same play. What else? Bjergsen getting caught in side lanes multiple times. Who else? Bwipo as well. Everyone forgot that Twitch existed in the game. How many times is Johnson going to sneak up on you with Twitch before you remember? I felt like I was watching solo queue. That's a solo queue-esque kind of cheese pick, right? Twitch. Oh fuck, I forgot Twitch was in the game. Lol. This is this is pro League of Legends. At the LCS level, you need to turn your brain on and wonder where everyone is. And if you're the bot lane or whoever's in charge of tracking Johnson, you need to be calling, hey, he's missing right now. He's not in this lane, and you need to give that respect. Hansama got caught out. I don't even know how many times. And there was a few times where Johnson ended up turning it back on him, but still, there was way too many times that you let that Twitch cheese you, if you will. So that's where I was a little bit disappointed with Team Liquid, where it's yeah, I feel like if they were playing the way they did last weekend, none of that would have happened.
Yeah, it definitely, this past week wasn't a good look for them, but it's hard to take a whole lot away from them and kind of throw in a lot of negativity their way when, EG, themselves, they went 1-1. I mean, at the end of the day, it's 1-1 versus 1-1, and
yeah. No,
yeah,
I agree. TL's still going to contend with them. I have no doubts there. Whenever they play each other, that'll be very interesting. But I think EG's just a little bit better looking right now. And yeah. One thing I will say, though, is that in the FlyQuest game, they held on. So they were behind 3K gold, and I want to say they were down a couple of drags as well. But they managed to get to Dragon about a minute and a half before Dragon spawn, which is pretty early to have full River setup. Now, being behind 3K, being able to get to River before the enemy team and have all the vision controlled for a minute straight is not something a lot of teams can do. Because what generally happens if you're holding on to that area, just River in general, for a minute and a half, you're usually losing some resources in a side lane, like a wave or something like that. But they managed to get almost everything as well while maintaining that and getting some players to get some resets off to purchase before the fight. That's a really difficult thing to do, and maybe you could throw some shade towards FlyQuest for allowing it to happen. But that's something that I was still really, really impressed with TL, and that kind of stopped FlyQuest from just running away and snowballing the game too hard and getting the soul too quickly or whatever to really make the game out of reach for them to come back. So that's one game where I don't think an average team comes back against FlyQuest. Yes, FlyQuest played it pretty poorly and well. So it was that Hansama was about to get charmed by the Rakan in the FlyQuest game, and CoreJJ timed the Lulu ultimate perfectly to interrupt the Rakan from getting the charm on his AD carry, which allowed them to clean up that fight as well. Another thing to shout out props for. That was a really nice play by CoreJJ.
I'll just let you know, you froze for about 5 seconds there, but unless there was anything crucial that people...
Did you catch anything?
Well, yeah. I caught the second... Yeah, I assume there wasn't anything big that people missed.
Nothing crucial. I just went on a little rant about how TL looked pretty good in some aspects, even if
No,
they
no, no.
didn't look good
It
the whole
it was
weekend.
only like for 5 seconds. So
Okay. Anything else, or should we go to 100 Thieves?
100 Thieves. I said this at the beginning. They're the only team right now in the LCS that's sat at 3-2. They're just smack dab in the middle. I guess I'll just kick it off by saying, I've said this now for the past 3 episodes, including this one. I just don't have the expectations that 100 Thieves is going to be the best team in the league anymore. Those expectations, I've
Mm,
completely dropped them. They're on the ground, like 100 feet that way. Not to say that I have zero faith in this team and I think this team is garbage or anything. It's just, Abadage is looking really bad in lane, and that's something that we saw at the
yeah.
beginning of the spring split. And that was one of the reasons why 100 Thieves was kind of being held back as a team before they went on that big run at the end of the split where they won. I think they won their last 5 of their 6 games because at one point in the season they were 6-6 and they finished 11-5, or sorry, not 11-5, 11-7. And it's just, this is the reality, and there's not much else to say for me. Just this is the reality of 100 Thieves. They're
I gotta ask you a question. I don't want to be making this up, so let me know if you remember this. When Abadage first got over here, which was just about a year ago now, right? Because it was summer last year that
season
he first
11 in
joined. Is that
summer,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Was he not saying that all the LCS mid laners were trash? Or am
I
I making that
mean,
up?
he could have been. He's EU, so he's cocky.
It. The thing is, I don't want to make this take if he didn't say that, but something in my mind is telling me that he said that. Let's say if he said that, like how the tables have turned about specifically his laning phase, like you mentioned. He is not looking that good. He's falling behind very often, and that matters. Now, he has continued to look good after laning phase, but it's a liability to be losing a lane every time. And again, we're 5 games into summer, so sure. But he also didn't have the greatest spring either. So I see where you're coming from with the worries for Abadage. Um, the thing is though, is like if someone told me that he managed to like find his game and like start to play better in lane, I wouldn't be surprised by that because I don't think he had any issues with laning last year. In fact, he was probably one of our better mid laners last year. So like, yeah, I guess I just wouldn't be surprised if he found it. But until that happens, I don't blame you for saying like I don't think this team is a top team just yet.
But
Um,
it's not just him, and I've said this before. FBI and Huhi,
mhm.
they even in spring split, they never got back to that level of being the best bot lane in the LCS. And you know, I've kind of come to the realization that might have just been a one split only thing rather than them sort of taking over and taking the reins of best bot in the league. So you know,
You know,
and the main thing that I also dislike was especially that game against Cloud9. I thought their draft was just fucking horrible. Like drafting the full scaling solo lanes and Gwen and Azir, putting a closer on Volibear, and then with the Senatom Kench pick. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like Senatom Kench is just a trap. Like it doesn't feel that strong. It's good in the early game, but it doesn't roll the early game, and it doesn't scale very well because Tom Kench becomes pretty much obsolete past level 13 when he just becomes glorified QSS, and Senna with a
Senna's kind
new.
of beast though.
I don't know, but she's not as strong as she once was with the late game build. She doesn't go Kraken Slayer anymore. She does the lethality Umbro Glaive, and they don't go rapid fire anymore. So they're actually pretty vulnerable in terms of the range. So I don't know. It feels like, I don't know. Senator to me it just feels like a complete bait. Like if you wanna play an early game lane, play a Callista lane, play Callista Renata, or play Callista. I don't know what are good supports that go with Callista. I don't know, Callista Thresh, Callista Braum, Callista Seraphine, or something. And if you,
Ballista Renata is pretty common right
yeah,
now.
that's like it's like the best Callista champ to play with, this Callista Renata. And if you want to go for the full late game, I mean, you go Ezreal Karma, go Ezreal Seraphine, and go Twitch even. Twitch seems like a really good late game pick now.
So I don't have any problem with the Senatom just because even if she's not dealing as much damage as she once did, the sustain is a lot more valuable ever since durability happened, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing it so often is because it is harder to pick up some of these kills, and so the sustain is extra valuable when it's more difficult to uh, kill things, I guess. So maybe that could be the reason. I will say I completely agree with you. I think I even said this. I was watching the games with Andrew, and I think I even said this when watching 100 Thieves that like I don't want closer on someone that's not going to hard carry the game. Like I don't want to see him on like a Vala Bear, for example. I want to see him on Lee Sin, which we did, and his Lee Sin is filthy, and it continues to be filthy. So that's one of the things that I think they will always have in their back pocket is if you need a guy to make plays, closer is that guy. I think that part hasn't changed whatsoever. That part of we mentioned how the top side of 100 Thieves has still looked pretty damn good. But yeah, I see the worry. I still think their bot lane's been better than last split. But again, sample size, right? You need to see more because they weren't very consistent last split either. So I think your worries are warranted. But I do see this team. I guess I gave them the hold because I do see this team probably winning approximately 60% of their games. If I had to pick buy or sell, I'd probably go buy before I went sell. I think that they're going to win more games than they lose. I think I feel confident in that at the very least.
Really, I think I'd be the reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
A little bit cold on them, huh?
I have more faith in the teams like in terms of above them right now. I have more faith in the TL and the EG, and when it comes to teams that are below them, I actually spoiler a little bit. I have regaining a bit of faith in TSM, but Cloud9 as well. I mean, I'd expect Cloud9 to pass them as well after they absolutely thrashed them on Sunday. But like I said, that was, in my opinion, an accurate depiction of 100 Thieves because their draft was god fucking awful.
Fair enough. Okay, let's go next to Golden Guardians.
Golden Guardians, we got some.
What did you think of Golden Guardians?
Some positivities entered the chat. You have them as the buy.
Mm-hmm.
I have them as the hold.
So it's just me.
Yeah, just you.
That's what I thought. But when you said that, I thought you were going to say that you also had them as a buy, and that was about to catch me off guard. Yeah. So just full. What's the word? Full
disclaimer.
Yes. I like this team.
Yeah, you're a little Golden Guardian stan. You are.
Yeah, but I do think that they're better. That's why I think I like them so much, is because I think they're better than what their record is, and so I want to see that realization come true, I guess. I do think their bot lane is pretty good. This weekend there was a game where Stixay is like 0-4 or something on the Callista, but I think that was against 100 Thieves. I looked at that game. A lot of his deaths are just like he's just getting shit on by closers, Lee Sin, which is like I don't think there's a lot of plays that he could do differently there. The areas that I'm looking at are still the solo lanes. That hasn't changed, but I got to give a little bit of props to Licorice because I've said that I don't really trust him to carry games, and he sort of did in the Fiora game. The reason why I say sort of is because yes, he was winning his lane, but it was against Huni, and also like a lot of those fights don't go so well if Stixay isn't Sniper God Senna from the bot lane. But you got to give credit where it's due because when he's making those plays, he does have the calculation most likely that, I can make this play knowing Senna will ulti top as well. So it's not just like, he got lucky because Senna saved him. It's like, we'll give him benefit of the doubt. He's making the calculations that he can win these fights with the Senna. But if Senna don't hit those shots, he's not getting that many kills. So, yeah. The other game that I have to admit I was a little bit disappointed with Licorice is the Ornn versus Gnar game.
Oh baby, that was a banger. Because it was a banger. 3 solo kills in the first 8 minutes.
I'm gonna flame a little bit. I'm gonna flame a little bit Licorice here. How many games of Gnar has this guy played? How do you get solo killed twice by Ornn, man? Like he solo killed Ornn first. So I'm like, okay, Licorice, they're putting the game in your hands. Let's go. And then he dies twice to Ornn, and I'm like, well, a copium is at least it's some days, Ornn, but I don't know if that makes me feel much better. You shouldn't be getting killed twice by Ornn by 6 minutes, especially when you killed him first already. So I went back and forth in my head about that, and I was quite tilted, to be honest, watching that game.
Yeah, the dichotomy of Licorice is fun to watch because he does have those moments where he'll whip out his pocket picks like Fiora or Aurelia. And he often when he puts on the carry pants, he's actually pretty good. But when you have to force Licorice to be I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Just like be a sponge and absorb some pressure and let the rest of the map kind of do the work for him, and he just needs to chill and just not die. That's his problem. Is he kind of just dies. Um,
So here's the thing though, like the one thing, like I don't think he's that great of a carry. Like I don't think that he carries that often. The other thing too, to be fair to him, is I don't really think he's put in a situation to carry very often. Like every single game, it just feels like he's either blinding Gnar or picking Gnar into something. And it's just like, oh, Licorice is playing Gnar again. That's not like, I don't know. To me, it's not like the craziest champion to really put the game in his hand. Now he does play the Fiora, which is a big pocket pick of his, and that like the fact that he gets the Fiora, that's where I'm expecting more carry performances. And I'm not, again, I'm like on the fence. I'm not convinced that he would have been able to carry that game if it weren't for Senna sniping from the other end of the map. So I want to see him do it on his own, you know? If that's his pocket pick in like his main or whatever, I gotta see him do it by himself, you know? I'm waiting for that.
yep.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's cool. I mean, for me with Golden Guardians, it's still difficult for me to put a lot of confidence in this roster and this team when we are constantly seeing a lot of individual mistakes, specifically from the solo laners of Licorice and Ablaze Olive. Their bot lane is definitely looking very, very strong. I definitely, the pickup of Stixxay versus Lost, we've already talked about, and how much more we prefer Stixxay, to Lost, and we think that their bot lane is one of the main reasons why this team is improving. But the solo laners are a problem for me, and Licorice does continue to make mistakes and die. Ablaze Olive continues to make mistakes and die.
I'm sorry to stop you there, Jane Teep. The audio went really wonky all of a sudden. I don't know what to say about that.
Just well, I don't know. I'm done with Golden Guardian, so we can move on. Then we can move on.
Okay, yeah, I'm done with Golden Guardians as well. I guess no. The last thing that I'll say is that there was a tweet from Dom saying that like there's a lot of people hating on Ablaze Olive for going for plays trying to make something happen from a doom situation. I guess just watching the games, I don't necessarily agree. Because I think that for like yes, sometimes you're in a doom situation, and yes, you have to go for plays, but a lot of these plays are just straight up ints. I don't know what to say more than that. I don't think that it's fair to say that all of these plays that he's making are just doomed plays.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side, when you have a reputation, I guess not say you have a reputation, when your reputation as of late has been overextending and dying and making a lot of questionable plays, it's pretty difficult to just, come out and just say, "Oh, you can't flame the guy because he's looking for plays." When all of what we saw from Ablaze Olive in 2021, or sorry, in 2020, in the spring split, was bad plays and dying and mispositioning. And so I can't really get behind that argument, and kind of when everything that I've seen in the last 6 months has been the opposite.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Next up we got TSM.
TSM, I have him as the buy, you have him as the hold, and I spoiled a little bit, 2 minutes ago, but I'm getting a little bit of confidence in TSM from what I've seen, and although they are sitting at 2-3 right now, and for whatever reason, not including myself, people have to seem a lot of confidence in this team. People are talking about TSM in terms of what they saw out of the first 2 weeks and putting them sort of in the top 5, top 6. I don't think people are ready to quite say that they're going to be taking on the title contenders of 100 Thieves, potentially, Team Liquid, Evil Geniuses, and maybe Cloud9 if they can kind of get everything back on track in terms of a win rate. But when you look at TSM, they're sitting at 2-3 right now. They had they had some pretty good games this past weekend in terms of players looking a lot better individually, and the team actually looking a lot better. The one match that I want to point out, obviously, is the TSM match, where we saw, I think, really strong performances from almost every single player on the roster. But the main one I want to point out is Mia in the bot lane. That guy's Renata was absolutely disgusting in that game, hitting multiple, 3-4 man ultis. It turned a lot of the team fights in that game from maybe a losing situation into a winning situation. And I did point it out before that the Kalista Renata lane is just so strong. We saw them solo kill Hansama Core JJ, and then we really saw the impact of the Renata in the later game team fights. And we Blue Jay alluded to it right a little bit at the beginning, but SPICA potentially getting back on that MVP form. He had a really strong week one, despite TSM going 1-2. You can talk about that 100 Thieves game when he was playing the Jarvan, when he just was doing work in the early game, had like 6 KP in the first, 12 minutes into the game. TSM actually had a lead against 100 Thieves in that game before losing it in the end. But I think TSM is they're just playing a lot better individually, and I think that was mainly the problem from what we saw out of them in Spring Split. Was we saw Tactical dying a bunch, we saw Kaido dying a bunch, we saw Spica not having a whole lot of impact, we saw Huni struggle at the beginning with this whole smite top strategy that they were trying to run, and I think we're seeing a lot more consistency out of the individual players from TSM, and this their team play as a result is getting a lot better.
Oh, the thing for me though that is still consistent tactical is still dying a lot. And look, it's great and all that they killed TL's bot lane, but that's still a problem that is happening way too often. And I don't think that that makes up. I don't think getting a 2v2 kill in bot lane is going to make up for constantly overextending and dying, or just randomly getting picked off before an objective is about to happen. That's something that tactical is still doing way too often, and that is going to be way too costly. That needs to change. So that's why I'm not ready to buy in on TSM yet. They're 2-3, right? So the way I look at it is that seems about right to me. I think that they're going to probably finish around even wins or losses, or maybe slightly below. And so that's why I kind of gave them the hold. Is I think they're right on par. But I will say, as far as the Spica thing is concerned, I do think he's actually looking like his MVP level. He's getting a lot of leads early on, and that's something that we didn't really see. And he's also making things happen. Even in his MVP split, I remember saying many times, like, there wasn't much happening from TSM in the early game, and that's changed a little bit. And so you could even make the argument that he's looking better in the early game this split than he did in his MVP split.
Yeah, obviously tactical inting is still a big problem, and I don't think that is a problem that's going to suddenly go away. But I think that the improvements we've seen from TSM have sort of been everything else except for that, and that obviously is a problem that we've seen even this year with TSM is tactical dying. But like I kind of said previously, we're seeing better individual performances from everybody else, which is sort of eliminating all of these various smaller problems that we saw in the spring split. Yes, there are still some maybe more evident problems on TSM that still haven't been fixed, but if they can continue to bring down these smaller errors, which I think that'll give them more freedom to work on these bigger errors, which would hopefully, put them into, the top half of the league. And from what we've seen so far, I think I can confidently say that they'll be at the very least a 500 team this split.
Interesting. Okay. That is interesting. We'll see if that's the case. I will say that the draft against Golden Guardians wasn't exactly the best. I remember thinking, like, if you draft Yasuo, usually you draft it with like a Gragas or something, or the Diana, so that you can make some nice wombos happen. And they didn't really have that tool. I don't think that it's enough to draft Yasuo on his own without a combo in pro play. I think that generally you're going to get punished if you don't have that synergy built into your comp, and that's something they didn't have. So maybe that's the reason why they lost that game.
They had a little bit with the Gnar, but I think mostly they
that's
were.
a small like that's not that like getting a good Gnar ulti isn't always reliable, right? Because one, people see it coming because they see the Gnar bar going up, right? It's like a very big tell, like, oh, he's about to Gnar it. So like half the time you don't even have that available to you. And so while you're right, there can be some really nice Yasuo Gnar combos. I don't think that's enough, and so that's why I don't really count it as uh, a synergy if like only half the time you can use it, right?
Yeah,
There's very small windows for a Gnar ulti to get off.
yeah. I will say, that game was definitely a very good game out of Golden Guardians, but I'm not really. Obviously, that game was very problematic for Huni in the top lane, but I'm not ready to shit on the rest of TSM because of that one game. That one game, I kind of just. I'm not gonna say that I throw it away and don't look at it, but you look at it like, okay, man, you got shit on top lane. It was kind of difficult to play out the rest of the game. Not every game is going to look like that, I think, for Huni, because I think Huni is actually TSM's one of their stronger members. Him and Spica, I think, really are the backbone of this team. But maybe Mia coming in is also going to look pretty good, because I've thought, other than the first game of the season for Mia when they played 100 Thieves, the rest of his games have actually been pretty good.
Yeah. Mia looked really great with the Renata. His ultimates were fantastic, and yes, the one is like specifically against Bwipo's Olaf. It like kind of accidentally hits the rest of TL, or that's what it looked like anyways. But even without that one, like even if you count that one as just being kind of lucky, I think he still had some really nice ultis throughout the rest of the game. Anyways, I think the game-winning fight was with Flash R, and then they followed it up with like Callista ulti to recombo with his ultimate already, and so that was a pretty nice play by I guess the bot lane in that particular case.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, next up.
Let's go Cloud9.
Yeah, next up we have Cloud9. Once again, I have him as to buy. You have him as to hold. I'm actually kind of interested to hear your thoughts on this because based off of your other teams that you've talked about, that would presume that Cloud9 is going to be around a 500 team then.
So this one is weird because it's this one for me. It's a short-term hold, long-term buy. Which I know that's
cheating. That
really
sounds
weird.
like cheating. That sounds like cheating.
No, but it's not though. It's not because the reason why is because they're not there right now, right? Like I don't think that they're going to go out next week and still look like a top team. I think that they are still on the road to get there, and they are looking better than they looked last week. But there's still definitely some rust on this team. I don't think right now they're playing like an above 500 team. Specifically with Jensen, there's a lot of rust. Like there's times where he's using a full LeBlanc combo in a wave where it's like you have no vision of the enemy team. Like how many times have we talked about players doing that? Like that's a really common mistake for lower tier players in the LCS, and that's a mistake that Jensen's making where it's like, okay, well now you've used your combo. You have no what's the word? God damn it, what the hell's the word? Movement. Help me out here. Mobility. No mobility left in your like because you've used your W and your ulti with your W, and so you're stuck in a side lane after you full cleared a wave, like, and then you just get picked. That's stuff that like you can't really have happen in the LCS. And so that's where I'm like, Blabber looked a lot better. His Gragas is kind of beast. It's usually been pretty beast though. Like that's nothing new. So that's the area where like if you want to be optimistic, I'm looking at Blabber. I think that he was probably their best player this past weekend. And overall, I think the team's going to be good in the long run. Like I still have that confidence that by the end of the year they'll look much better, but I don't think that's the case right now. So that's why I kind of gave them the hold. Like I was kind of stuck between hold and buy.
Yeah, what I would say about Cloud9, mainly for the buy on my end, is they're kind of the reverse of CLG, where they've actually had a fairly difficult first 5 games of the split, where they've played Team Liquid, 100 Thieves, and Evil Geniuses. Yes, they had some easier games against Golden Guardians and Dignitas. They did end up losing the Golden Guardians in week 1, but if you look at their schedule going forward, they have CLG, TSM, FlyQuest, and Immortals. Which, if you take a look at those 5 games, I think it's fairly likely that at the minimum you're going to win 3 games out of those 5. I think because you can confidently say that Cloud9 is going to beat Immortals and FlyQuest, and at worst case they're going to beat one of CLG and TSM. So I don't know with Cloud9. Yes, they didn't have their roster. Yes, they haven't been practicing. Jack actually tweeted out before this week of LCS that Tuesday was only the first day that the entire team was scrimming together, and obviously that's a little bit concerning because a lot of these other teams, maybe look at top teams like Team Liquid, they've probably been practicing, well into the off season and during MSI, so they might be a month behind in terms of practice, but you can see the individual kind of prowess with these players and this team. Fudge, it feels like he's back in the top lane, and there hasn't really been a lot of issues. I thought his game against 100 Thieves, where he played the Gangplank, was just fantastic. His landing was pretty flawless. He was hitting a lot of barrel combos. His ulti's placement was really nice. So I got confidence in Fudge. I got confidence in Blabber. Yeah, Jensen, he's a little... The mechanics don't seem to be fully there yet, and maybe it's not mechanics. Maybe it is game sense, kind of like you talked about with LeBlanc, and then he had that Yone game against Golden Guardians where he was just whiffing all of his ults and all of his Qs. But he's still a really, really good player. And their bot lane is just continuing to be, I think, the point to watch with this team, because if Sven and Berserker can sort of play together well, this could definitely be a team that threatens for the best bot lane in the league, with Team Liquid kind of struggling.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with a lot of what you said. The bot lane, I think with what we saw to the bot lane, just one weekend, of course, but like I think that's probably about as good as you could ask for, considering they haven't had lots of time to practice. You know, Sven is support for the first time ever, and you get the 100% win rate. Even if the games didn't look that clean out of the team in general, I don't think you can ask for much more out of Cloud9 right there. So I think there's a lot of optimism that if they can go 2-0 in their first week after not getting a lot of time to play together, that can only mean good things for when they are regularly scrimming together and getting a lot better practice. You have to assume better things will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't really have much more to add. I pretty much am right on the same page as you. I was impressed with the GP. I think Fudge will continue to do good things. Nothing really different out of me.
Yeah,
So both short
Cloud9.
term and the long term, I'm expecting them to be in the conversation at the end of the split still.
Yeah,
That hasn't changed.
Cloud9 seem to be, along with CLG, I think, two of the mysteries of the LCS this split, because with Cloud9, we're wondering if they're going to get to that point, and or some people might say when they get to that point. And with CLG, it's, are they going to continue to look this good, and if and or when the drop off is going to happen.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we
Okay,
got
let's go FlyQuest now.
Flight Quest. You have them as to sell your boys. You're wearing the jersey, but you don't got faith in them, huh?
I love him, and let me also say, I fucking love watching the Twitch, man. I love it. Johnson is just flipping he's flipping all of these cheese engages. He has one where he's catching them off guard, and he's killing everyone, and then the next one they just int, and it's like, oh, you probably should have waited for you to have exhaust up or whatever it is. Like Afro didn't have his sums, he didn't have ignite or exhaust on the one play, and they ended up dying. And then next thing you know, the next time they go for it, they find a pick, and like that, their games were so up and down this weekend. I absolutely loved it. I'm still not able to hold on this team. What are they, 2-3?
Yep.
I don't think they're going to win more than 40% of their games. I do think that the team is still worse. And I hate to be the guy, but you have to point to Philip, and it's nothing against him. Like, he's a young player, but I think FlyQuest has accepted that this is more of a long-term play, and he's not supposed to be better than Kumo in the short term. Now, mind you, he has made some pretty nice plays. I will give him that. I still don't know, man. He got hard rolled by Dokla in that lane. And I mean, he was also playing the Jason Dinar, right? It was Jason Dinar. I'm not making that up, am I?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Jace is supposed to win that lane and not get hard smash. Now, you could, if you want to be on the copium side of things, you could be like, well, he just got ganked once and then things got out of hand just because off of that one gank, he ended up losing his whole tower, and then the lane was lost from there from one mistake. So, okay, fair enough, but that's a really costly mistake to get absolutely smashed by what is supposed to be a matchup in your favor. That's where I'm a little bit like, oh, well, I'm not expecting the most out of Philip. But again, like, I don't think people should expect the most out of Philip. He was a pretty, from what it sounds like, he was a subpar academy player, but they just really like his attitude and think that he's got a lot of growth potential, so they're going with him for the summer split. It seems like FlyQuest has kind of accepted that they're not going to Worlds. Now, I don't know if they have or not, but that's the impression I get anyways. With that said, I'll continue to cheer for them. I fucking love watching this team.
Yeah. I can't recall if I had them 6th or if I had them 7th in my power rankings at the beginning of the split. I remember that I had Dig 5, and that was the main oopsie. I want to say I had them 6 because I think I had TSM 7. But either way,
I had them 8. I think I had FlyQuest 8. Do you remember what I had them as?
You had them lower than I did, so
okay. I think I had them 8.
Yeah, it was somewhere between 6 and 7 for me, and I think they're probably around there. Maybe I put them a little bit lower. The main problem, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, is just Johnson. He's a little bit all over the place, and it feels like we see that, like, that's kind of a theme with Johnson, where there'll be some games where we have him on the super aggressive, like the Nami Lucian or Kalista or something, or the Twitch in this case for this last weekend, and he is just like all in your face and killing you on repeat. But then there's the other games where it's the complete opposite, where Johnson and Afro are just getting creamed in lane, and they can't do anything, and their bot lane has zero impact in the game, and it's just 4 quick dragons, soul, insta, the game is over. And the main thing with FlyQuest for me is they just feel very hit or miss. There'll be games where nobody's playing well, and just Jose Diodo can't do anything because top's losing, mid's losing, bot's losing. But then there are these other games where we see their bot lane have a really strong, performances in lane, and that leads to Jose Diodo being able to do what he wants on the map, and the map's wide open. They can take heralds, they can take dragons, they can do whatever they want, but quite often we'll just see the team just look completely out of sorts and not on the same page at all. I would say that even when you look at some of the bottom teams in a league, like a Dignitas, like an Immortals even, when they start losing their games or they go for a play and they kind of lose the game off of that play, it was a team call to go for that play. I mean, like the main thing that sticks out is like the CLG versus Dignitas game last week. Dig completely lost the entire game in the first 5 minutes where they went for that river fight and three
Yeah.
people died and the game was just over. But that was a play where the call was to go for the fight and to take the fight. And, if Biofrost doesn't miss all of his abilities and River doesn't miss all of his abilities on Zinzal, like maybe they win that fight and the game is won off of there. But with FlyQuest, it just seems that like everyone is kind of doing their own thing individually and it's not like connected. It's just this guy's doing this thing, this guy's doing this thing, and Jose Diego's like, "Can I gank? Oh no, I'll go back to farming." So I would like to
I
see a little bit more from the team play aspect with FlyQuest because it feels like their games are very lane dependent.
I will agree that you don't always know what you're getting with FlyQuest, and that's something that's kind of worrying to me because I think most teams will continue to get better as the split goes on. And when you just have this team that is so inconsistent from one day to the next, I don't know how you can judge that team and be like, yes, this team will have plenty of growth. And while I certainly hope they do, I just can't necessarily see that happening. And so I guess that's why I'm selling. Um, Maybe they get 6 or 7 wins this split. Uh, what is that for win percentage? If they get six, that's like 33%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess maybe they get 7, and that's probably somewhere close to the 40%. I don't know. Maybe I should have gone with a hold, but anyways, I'm giving them either 6 or 7 wins by the end of the split, and not more than that. Nothing else for me on FlyQuest though.
Well,
They're fun to
Dignitas.
watch.
Ding ding ding. Bye bye bye, Dignitas.
Yeah. What does that mean?
I don't know. It's just I don't know.
Okay, so
Dignitas
we're
is
both
epic.
buying. The way you mentioned Dignitas like a few minutes ago, I thought that you were going to be like hold and be like, yeah, they are bad or something. Because when you talk, you're like, I had them fifth. So okay, you're buying. So
Yep.
you think they're better than the 1-4 record? I think that's fair. I definitely think they're 1-4 or better than 1-4 rather. Um, but that clearly, from what you said earlier, that means you don't think they're the fifth best team. So how high do you think they're going to climb then?
Well, yeah, they're definitely not top five from what I can see, but I would also sort of put them into the where I have sort of CLG in terms of where they might finish in the standings, somewhere in the sixth, seventh type area. That would have them making playoffs, and if people forget, 8 teams are actually making playoffs in the summer split. That was one of the changes they made
Yeah.
last year. So at the very least, this team will probably be playoff bound, although they are sitting outside of the playoffs right now. And I'll once again kind of put this into the equation for them. In the first week, they played Cloud9, 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, and if people want to talk about it, they also played CLG. So if people think that CLG is a good team, well, hey, they played 4 good teams in their first 5 games of the split. Their other game that they played was against Immortals, where they almost perfect gamed them. So it's from what I've seen
I
out of Dig,
agree.
so far, I don't see any of these huge red flags. Like, oh my god, what the fuck's going on? Like this team is completely doomed. I just see it more as they've just been outclassed, and that's okay. There are bottom teams, or not even bottoms. Like there are not every team can finish first, and not every team can finish second, and not every team can finish third. And in Dignitas's case, they're never gonna be one of those teams. And what they should be pushing for is those middle of the pack teams and the fifth, fourth places. And unfortunately, due to the poor start, and that might be because of the teams they played, they'll probably reach maybe fifth place at the max, but it's unlikely it's unlucky right now based on how they started.
Yeah. Um, I completely agree. Like a lot of times when we go with the copium take, it's kind of tongue in cheek. But I think the copium take is totally fair in this one to be like, well, look at who they played so far. I think that's fair. And I don't think this team is going to be that bad once they get to play all of the teams. I think that they probably still will end up around. Now, I don't remember exactly where I had them in my power rankings, but probably still somewhere in the vicinity of where I had them before. God, what would that have been? Maybe sixth?
You had
Maybe I
okay.
had them?
I remember now because you had them sixth because I had
6, and then I had TSM 7. The only thing is maybe I would have TSM 6 and them 7 now. I guess what I'm saying is I could see them being neck and neck with TSM by the end of the split because I'm a little bit more cold on TSM than you are. Yeah, and I guess I'm just a little bit more hot on Dignitas with their current record, so I'm buying.
No,
The thing is, though, and I hate to be the guy to point this out after 5 games, but I don't think their problem has changed. I think the problem is still consistent. I think that is still the top lane. They got a new top laner, but well, okay. In all fairness, Gamsu hasn't played in some time in the LCS, so he's kind of finding his own again. But he did play in academy, and so it's not like he's like totally fresh coming back into league. And so I think you need to judge him like you would any other academy player. It's like, well, no matter how much success you had in academy, which I don't even know if he did have a lot of success in academy, that doesn't automatically translate over into the LCS. And well, I mean, he's kind of getting outplayed. The only time that he didn't really get outplayed is when he played Revenge. Which I don't know, Revenge doesn't really outplay a lot of top laners, despite the
no.
fact that he said he would.
I don't know if Revenge is
Okay,
playing the game when Immortals is playing, but that's okay.
let's not do this. Immortals, we'll talk about them next. We'll flame. Immortals really is, J&T, they really are this year's CLG as far as like, remember every episode how we found a way to flame CLG,
Yeah.
even if we didn't want to? That's what Immortals has become on this show.
Yep.
Our podcast is just like, we're not even talking about Immortals and we're just flaming them already. It's hard not to. It really, really is. Okay. I still think that River is quite good. I think most people in the league still have him as one of the better junglers, and I think also the fans watching would agree that he's still great. The area that I need to continue to point out is Biofrost needs to look better because he looked a lot better last split. This weekend was better than last because he had a really rough week 1. As long as he just slowly keeps getting better and gets back to himself, I have no problem with this team making it to that 6th place spot that I thought that I would have them at. So I guess where I'm looking at the most for improvement is Bio, because he had such a good spring split. So that's the guy that I'm putting the workload on for them to turn it around their 1-4 start.
Yeah, I'll just go back to the Gamsu point real quick. Yeah, he's definitely not looked very good in the first 5 games, but I'm not really ready to give up on him because from everything that I've seen on Twitter, it's just like everyone is just ready to give up on him, and it's a little bit surprising to see that only after 5 games, considering we saw about 1.5 years of shittery out of Fake God. So I would say that 5 games is a little bit quick to sort of jump the gun to say Gamsu's horrible, get him out of there. Yeah, he hasn't been that great. And top lane is still problematic for Dignitas. I would say that it hasn't been as problematic as Fake God, but I don't know, but not by much, not by much.
No, you're right. You're right, because there was like a very glaring hole in the top lane. Like, it was quite bad what was going on up there. And the other thing that I will say is that we did see signs of really good synergy, and I'm referring to the TP play for those that don't remember it. Gamsu timed his TP perfectly with his Narbar. Like, they had the engage. So that seems a lot easier to do than it actually is. Timing Narbar is one of the reasons why I don't really like the champion altogether, to be honest. But it's a really difficult thing to do to get the engage off and be able to Mega Gnar at the right time. And that was something that he had the perfect Narbar. It was like almost full, and his TP lands right behind them. Perfect TP flank, ends up getting the 2-man Gnar ulti, which ends up winning them that fight, and then the game just went further in their favor. But that was a play where I was like, that's really tough to coordinate the timing on that. Because Gnar has such small windows, and like that's an area where I'm like, okay, Gamsu, like that's a pretty good play. Need to see more of it before I have a lot of faith, but that was a pretty nice play, and so I needed to shout out that play specifically.
One thing that's weird about like the Narbar and how the mechanic works is once your rage fills up and it goes to like 96 or 97, it'll just automatically go to full, and you'll just transform. I feel like the mechanic's a little bit wonky in terms of I think it's like you get 4 rage for attacking, whether not like that's a minion, a champion, a tower, whatever. But once you get to a certain threshold of I think it's like 96 or 97, you'll just go like it'll just put you on a timer and say, hey, now transform. So I feel like it's I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it's like it's an inaccurate science of like timing the Narbar. I don't know if I've used that term correctly, but
no, I get what you're saying though.
Yeah, it's just a bit weird
I'm
and
getting
wonky.
the message you're putting down. Yeah, interesting. And then I also think Blue's still kind of underrated. I thought that he's actually looked pretty good so far.
I wouldn't even. Yeah, I guess I would call him underrated because nobody seems to talk about him, but he's actually been like pretty solid for the majority of the time that he's been in the LCS. He hasn't been this god tier mid laner who's smashing people, but like his laning is good, his team fighting's pretty good, and he's not inting. So what more can you ask?
That's usually where the underrated players are going to lay. They're usually going to be on a Dignitas, on a Golden Guardians, that kind of thing. They're going to be on a team that doesn't have a lot of eyeballs on them, and people don't really care about their games that much. I think that's usually where the underrated players are going to sit. Nothing more for me on Dignitas. I can't wait to see them bounce back because I really want them to. So
Yep.
even if they don't bounce back into like top tier mode, I have full confidence that they'll bounce back and be able to take games off of the other teams in their vicinity. Okay, let's go Immortals now. We can do the flame thing.
Yep, last out
Oh
Immortals.
dear God.
I have them as the sell. They're 1-4, but guess what? I said this last time. They shouldn't have even have won that game. So in my books, they're still winless. Like when you almost get perfect gamed for the second time in a season within 5 games, that is just really bad. Like really bad. I don't even know what to say. Like.
So I actually have a lot to say on Immortals this episode.
Well, I meant about the perfect games,
in
but
my notes.
Oh no, no. I just meant in terms of like getting perfect gamed in the span of 5 games twice almost. Like that's crazy. But
yeah, they got one drag in the second one, and it was against Dig, right?
And it was like a dragon steal sort of. So they didn't. It wasn't really a steal, like, but.
I did just say that I think Dignitas is better than their 1-4, but let's not pretend like they're a top team in this league. Like you shouldn't be getting perfect games against anyone, quite frankly, but against an average team in the league.
Yeah.
So that is really, really worrying as well. Where to start?
I'll start.
Okay, well,
I was a bit of a Lost fanboy, but he sucks balls.
Dude, he actually had a good game this weekend, though. There was the one game that he actually made some really nice plays. You're going to start with Lost?
Man,
what was that?
He's been not good at all.
Was it the FlyQuest game? What was the one game where he actually had a really good game? Was it FlyQuest, where he actually was making plays?
Well, he played. They played FlyQuest last week.
Oh,
wouldn't have been this past weekend. It must have been against EG then, because it wasn't against Dig, because I almost got perfect gamed.
Yeah. It was. It was against EG. Thank you. The game was like kind of lost, and no pun intended. And then Lost went and like. Well, who was it that he went in the top lane and 1v1 in the top lane? He even 1v1 Danny. Danny was walking up and using the MF with the Leandries thing, which we didn't talk about for some reason. And then he like kind of noticed the pattern that like every like few seconds, Danny just kept walking up and getting the quote unquote free E to like get the Leandries burn, and Lost just read him like a book and was like, you can't just keep doing this on the same timer when it's off cooldown. He went up and he used the Xayah feathers and fucking killed his ass, and that was a nice outplay, and he did the same thing again in the top lane. So while I still think Lost is bad, I do agree with that. There was one game this weekend where he actually had a good game despite the fact that the rest of his team is pretty bad. So I guess I got the good stuff out of the way for Immortals.
Let's go. He did something.
Any more flame, JNT, or is it my turn to flame?
Hey man, their fucking existence is a flame, so they even had flame on their team, so go ahead.
Dude, so Revenge, like the game starts and Revenge is like, yeah, I think Gamsu is like a weaker addition to the league. I think
God.
I'm direct quoting. I might be paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Did you see that or no?
Yeah.
And then, the thing is, his matchup was kind of shit, so he ended up playing like Ornn into something, right? What was the matchup? Like it was something like, it was like whatever.
I think he was playing Ornn.
Yeah, I don't remember what the lane was. The problem that I have is even if you're playing the Ornn, if you think a guy is a weaker addition to the league than like replacing Fake God, right? Like you need to smash that. I don't care what the fucking matchup is. And he didn't, and he still just got hard dunked on in the other game as well. So Revenge is continuing to get shit on. I would love to see him turn it around. I'm done waiting for it to happen. So there's that. The last thing I'll say on this team is I think they're very predictable. I tried this weekend to focus on watching Kenvi. I really did. But I was too distracted by the fact that, like, I feel like you know exactly what this team is going to do when you plan for them. I think Immortals is probably one of the easiest teams ever to prep for. You know that PoE is going to play a mage and just chill in the mid lane, which he continued to do. He got outroamed by JoJo in that game, and, like, he still sat there with, like, a 5 CSD advantage. And it's like, great, you've been in the lane the whole time, and all you have is a 5 CSD advantage? That's not really going to do anything. What?
That's just funny. Just laughing.
Oh, and then funny. Ignar, I've mentioned many times, I think Ignar is great with flanking. Everyone knows that's what he wants to do. But I also mentioned earlier how, like, Jojo Pion saw him flanking on the Alistar and was like, oh, I'm just going to go challenge him now. That's like a soccer term, right? or a football
Challenge
term.
him, yeah.
The challenge, yeah. Anyways, he went and challenged him before he could pull off the flank, and it's like you can do that because you know that's the one card they have up their sleeve. Like that's the only thing that I think Immortals has going for them is I think Ignar is a good player. He's really good with flanks, but if there's only one thing to worry about when you're playing this team, it's pretty easy to be like, oh guys, all we need to do this game is make sure that we don't get TP flanked or Ignar flanked, and that's it. Cover your flanks, we win, GG. So that's a problem that I have with Immortals right now is I don't think prepping for them is difficult, and they don't have anything fancy or anything like that to really challenge a team.
Yeah.
I don't see where the carry performance is going to come from.
It's just really difficult, I think, for the playmakers of Immortals in terms of Kenvi and Ignar being the jungle support, and everyone talks about jungle support as one of the most important duos in the game in terms of setting up vision, and vision allows you to be able to make plays and to be able to control objectives when you have just like two kind of big inters in Lost and Revenge, and then Power of Evil, who is sort of known for his inactivity in the early game. So as you kind of mentioned, it's just really easy to sort of know what Immortals is doing or trying to do, because in all likelihood they're not going to be winning top, they're not going to be winning mid, or maybe they might be winning mid in terms of CS, but they're losing it in terms of map pressure and mid lane roams and ganks and whatnot. So it just kind of feels like Kenvi is sort of drowning, where he can't really do much of anything, and if he is doing something, he's trying to he's doing the thing where he's like trying to plug too many holes, and the holes keep coming. Like when you're on like a ship, there's like a hole. The hole bursts and he covers his hand the hole, and then another hole bursts and he has to get his hand, and the next hole bursts and he uses his foot, and then he ran out of things to cover the holes with.
Man, you're painting a picture of like some Looney Tunes shit in my head.
Yeah.
He did cost his team the game though on that really bad base, which is that's like a minor mistake in the way that like there's been a bunch of people that get caught basing in the wrong place and die, but it was just so much more costly than usual because it was so late in the game and because I think Baron was up, and so they ended up just snowballing the game after that. That was the only play that I remember from Kenvi this weekend, even though I was like, I'm going to watch Kenvi. That's the only thing I remember, and I kind of feel bad for that. But yeah, that was really, really costly, and you can't do that. You can't do that. And I'll even say, like, Pride Stalker, who I think is great, made the same play in the Golden Guardians game, obviously, because that's what team he plays for, but he didn't get as hard punished because, it wasn't the same time in the game, the objectives that were up weren't the same, that kind of thing. So other players, even good players in the league, make the same mistake, but that one was just more costly.
Yeah, Immortals stinky.
Before we finish on Immortals, just a couple of things that I found. Because they have like so many games where they're not getting any kills, I was just like, how many kills do they have this split? 27 in 5 games. Sometimes
that's more than I
get
thought.
27 kills in one game. The thing is, that's not that much. That's an average of 5.4 kills per game.
I know, but that considering they had 0 in 2 of them, I feel like 27 in 3 games is actually a lot, considering how bad they've been.
27 in 3 games isn't that much. It's like 9.
I know that's more. That's
low.
more. That's more than I thought it would be.
One was a win. One of the games was a win.
Yeah, they won, but they didn't win.
Yeah.
They got like 11 in that game or something.
They also have 70 deaths.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
They're dying quite often as well. And the other thing that I'll say too is like the revenge lane against Impact. I thought the post game interview was really funny because I think it was Latigris asked Impact like what he thought about the matchup or something like that, and he's like, I think he was like really nervous or something, which was like so BM, but like it's also Impact, so it's way funnier than like if some random top laner just said it. He's like, yeah, I think he's really nervous because he like just decided to gamble. And what he means by that, I remember when I was watching the game, I was like, why would you do that? He was playing Gwen into the GP, and he went to hit the barrel, but Impact got the barrel explosion off, so he dashed in and got barreled, and it's like, okay, now you just die. And you flipped the whole game on trying to dash in and hit the barrel. No reason to do that.
Yeah, that's he failed the minigame.
And that's what made Impact be like, yeah, I think he was nervous or something, which was really, really funny. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got on Immortals. I guess I said I put them as the hold though, so I guess that means I think they're gonna win approximately 20% of their games, which is what is that? That's not even 4 wins, is it?
No, it's more like 3.
Okay, well, I'll give them 4 wins, which is about a hold.
Yeah.
I guess I should have bought.
Under. Whatever the under is, take the under.
So how many wins you giving them?
Dude,
we should do this now.
I don't know, like 4 at max, 3.
You should have put the buy on there then.
No, they stink.
Okay. Yeah, they are pretty bad. Okay, let's move on now. Something I wish I would have mentioned this at the start of the episode, that we were going to talk about this. I completely forgot to put it in the title, so Bean Soup Award to Blue Jay. LCS franchising we've been talking about recently, but a little bit of a thing on Twitter today with LCS Eevee. If people don't know who that is, it's just like some rumor account. It's basically budget LEC Wooloo, if we're being completely honest, but had a tweet that I guess popped off, we'll call it today, about relegations being brought back. And so we thought, well, maybe we should have these conversations kind of combined. J&T, you want to give a little bit more context of just what the fuck I'm talking about?
Yeah, so earlier this week, I think it was on Tuesday, I want to say, there was an article that was front page Reddit, which I thought was really interesting. And it was a guy, I'm going to get his name here because he had it at the top of his thing. I want to give him a name shout out. Robert Haynes. He wrote this article basically just talking about what the LCS looked like after franchising in terms of teams' win rate. And I'll preface it right at the beginning by saying all the stats that he used in this article, I recommend you go check out the article. I'll probably post it in the link in the description here, or it'll be in the comments or something like that. But
you're going to, as long as you don't forget, is what you're saying?
Well, I won't forget because I just said it.
I'll try to remind you.
I just said it, so I won't forget. I'd never forget.
Okay, sounds good. Beautiful.
I just thought it was really interesting. You know, he gave a lot of stats based off of teams' performance in the regular season and some trends, some unfortunate trends for some of the teams that we have in the LCS right now. And going hand in hand with this LCS Eevee tweet talking about relegations, I'll say right off the bat, the bottom 3 teams in terms of winning percentage since franchising came into the picture, which would be the beginning of Season 8, CLG is last with 35%, followed by Immortals with 37%, and Golden Guardians with 39%. And those are some pretty horrific numbers, considering these are teams that have been in the LCS for quite some time now. The only one that hasn't been there since the beginning of franchising was Immortals, because they were previously known as Optic, I think for 2 years. I think they were Optic for both Season 8 and for Season 9. But to see 3 teams in the LCS, current teams in the LCS, that have been at the bottom for so long when it comes to franchising, I think the question of bringing relegations back into the picture is somewhat relevant. And I think a conversation needs to be had probably within the LCS in terms of making it a little bit more competitive, especially from the bottom up, because we see regions like in the LPL or like in the LEC where we see a lot of parity. In the majority of seasons, we don't see this constant top 5, bottom 5 that we're always talking about in the LCS, where it's like, okay, we know that all these teams are going to be in the top 5, we just don't know the order. And we know all these teams are going to be in the bottom 5, but we just don't know the order. And you look over in the LEC, and their top 5, their bottom 5 is switching by the minute. I mean, they had Mad Lions were an 8th place team in Spring Split. And, you know, people think that they're going to be back on the top. And Vitality has gone from being like a top team back in Season 8 where they went to Worlds as the 2nd seed to being a bottom team to back to being potentially a top team with the super team. But guess what? They're kind of more like a middle of the pack team. So
there's not that much variant. Like, I don't think it's that different because they still have like BDS, which was
well, Rogue was bad. Or Rogue was pretty like middle of the pack until now they've gotten good. And
yeah.
You know, Excel was, I guess, a bottom team.
You can make the same argument. You can make the same argument with EG though, right? Because they were middle of the pack and now they're really good. So I think, which is kind of weird because Inspired, you know, you could kind of make the parallels there. And then there's also like SK's been kind of bad for a while and they continue to be. Who's the other one? Astralis has been bad. They're continuing to be bad. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it looks that Origin. Different from the LCS. Good, so.
But I guess what I mean by that, and I'll go into a little bit of detail, is even though you look at teams who are at the bottom, you can go back and look at different points in time to where you can say, oh, this team was actually, you know, this split, they actually performed really, really well. And in the LCS's case, there's just this constant, you know, there are these constant 3 teams of Golden Guardians, Immortals, and CLG who are just at the bottom. And I'll give kind of a jarring statistic right here, which when I read it out loud, everyone who's listening will probably go like, wow, what the fuck? That is horrible. Golden Guardians and Immortals have never had a split where they were above 500 in the regular season. Like,
Yeah.
that
Now,
is
Golden
really
Guardians, I
bad.
believe they did go 9-9 one split, right? That was
Yeah.
when FBI and
Hmm.
that was when they started getting good and then lost all their players. To be fair,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't put Golden Guardians in the same shame area as I would like Immortals or CLG. And even with CLG, like people have finally, I think there's a lot more sympathy for CLG because they finally this year have committed to changing things. So I think people are mostly, when they look at this, they're just like, Immortals, get the fuck out of the league, please.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that a fair assessment?
I mean, kind of, but a one-off split is not really, something to sort of jump out of the
Yeah.
fucking bleachers for. And I'll read another one out because this is a very good article. I recommend you go read. It has a lot of stats, but there's also like a kind of, I wouldn't even call them fun facts, but they're interesting facts, about what has gone on over the course of the last 4 years. And it says the bottom three teams, those bottom three teams being Golden Guardians, Immortals, and CLG, have only had one top three regular season finish, and that was CLG in 2019 summer, where they did have Power Wheel on their roster. They had Wiggly and Jungle. That was kind of funny. But
Yeah.
the whole point of me bringing this up in the first place is that when it comes to the LCS and when it comes to franchising, the bottom three teams are the bottom three teams, and that hasn't changed almost at all in the last 4 years. And
Yeah.
when you do bring up a topic like relegations, it was sort of introduced at the beginning to say that, well, we don't want this pressure of relegations on these LCS teams to where they have to make sweeping changes split after split to contend and not be in the bottom two. And I think people initially took that as a very positive talking point because that would allow teams to maybe go for these more developmental rosters and sort of work on the young talent in the league and be able to build your roster and build your team and build your franchise over the course of a longer period of time than having to find quick fixes split in, every single split to avoid these relegations. And while I think that was a very intelligent, position that the LCS made, where it allowed teams to sort of focus on their development and to focus on fostering young players, we really haven't seen a lot of that, and the bottom teams have just stayed at the bottom. And that's, I think, the problematic area that we're seeing is these three teams are almost always on the bottom. There's only one split where any of them were in the top three. Two of them have never even gotten a regular season record above 500, and their winning percentages are, the best winning percentage is Cloud9 with 70%. CLG is half of that at 35.
Yeah. The thing is, that's why I do think that franchising was a good thing, is because I think it took a long time to see the proof, but CLG is the proof as to why, because I don't think they're running the roster that they did this spring if there was a chance to get relegated. Do you? That's a
Yeah.
really big risk to run a bunch of. You don't want to get relegated, and so I guess this all. Should I read the tweet out? Like I don't know where to go with this. There's so many things I want to say
Yeah,
all at
read it
once.
out.
So the tweet that LCS Eevee tweeted today was, I honestly think LCS needs relegations again. The bottom five teams right now are just sitting in LCS, not looking to win LCS with their rosters, and it's not like they are developing players, he puts in quotation marks. It feels like they are just waiting for LCS to grow so they can sell their spot. And I don't think that's necessarily the case with all of the teams that we just mentioned. Like, I do think Golden Guardians they've been a perfect example of a developmental team. The only problem is they end up getting bought out. Like, they don't have the money to keep these players. I don't think that the bottom five teams are not trying to win LCS. It's that I don't think they can afford to win LCS. Because usually the best scenario that you could do with like these developmental players is use them the way they did like Danny and Jojo Pinot, which yes, I understand is like the perfect example, but they're surrounded by guys that are veterans that can also teach them how to play the game at a very high level. Like, don't get me wrong, Danny and Jojo are great, but do you think they're as good as they are now if they're not playing with Impact and Inspired and Vulcan? I don't think so. I think a big part of their development is being able to play with some of the best in the league, and that's how you get better, is by playing with the best. And these organizations can't afford the best. Like, there's no way Golden Guardians. We've seen a million times Golden Guardians be like, we don't have the money to buy these players. So then they just sold their whole fucking roster over to 100 Thieves, which is a team that has money. And that's the difference there. I fully believe Golden Guardians wants to win. I have no doubt. It's just not going to happen because they can't afford to keep those players.
I guess what I'll say then, I'll ask you a question then. if the league had available suitors or organizations to take over some of these quote unquote bottom teams who had bigger budgets, do you think the LCS would step in and make that change themselves? And knowing that they might be able to field more competitive teams, or at the very least have teams with more money at their disposal to make the league overall more competitive?
So that's something that as a fan you want to be the case. I've said many times that like that one split where they blamed COVID and they were like, "Oh, we don't have enough money for our LCS team," and then they paid their NBA roster $150 million in the same season because they're owned by Golden State. I'm like, "Don't tell me you don't have the money." You could always say, "Look, we don't think it's worth the investment because the return on the investment isn't there in the LCS." That's a different argument. Saying we don't have the money to buy these players is just a fucking lie. It's a fucking billion-dollar organization, probably the most popular team in the NBA right now. Stop me if I'm wrong, JNT, but probably the most
Probably.
popular team. Like, don't tell me you don't have the money. So that's where it's like, can the LCS do that? Is another problem. Can you say, look, you're not trying to win, even though we know you have the money, we're kicking you out? That's a different argument of whether they can do that versus whether they will do that.
Well,
And I know there's a little bit of, I just want to clarify because people are going to say, like, Blue Jay, you're contradicting yourself. 5 minutes ago, you say they don't have the money. What I mean is, Golden Guardians, the organization, isn't getting the funding from their parent company. Their parent company, being Golden State Warriors, has the money. Golden Guardians does not have the money, to be specific there. Sorry.
well, I wanted to you talking about the LCS stepping in themselves. I recall another Reddit post that was on the front page not too long ago, talking about how when franchising was initially added into the league, that not relegations, I don't know what the word for it is, and I don't remember this Reddit post, but there was basically something to say that if you are a bottom team in the league and if you continue to place in the bottom two spots for X number of splits in a row, that would somehow trigger a manual review from Riot to where they had to go over your finances and stuff like that. And I don't know if it was specifically that or if there was more or less to that. But I think that, I mean, I don't have all the info in front of me, but Golden Guardians has probably been a bottom team, apart from that one split, probably since their existence in franchising.
Isn't it a certain amount of splits consecutively, though?
It
And
might
they haven't
be.
had those.
It might be. It might be
And I'm pretty
consecutive
sure
splits.
CLG almost had that. I'm
Maybe.
pretty sure this last split. I remember. I think I remember Travis talking about it on Hotline League, saying like, and people bringing it up in like with their calls or in the chat or whatever, that like, if CLG finished bottom two this split that just happened in spring, then that would have caused it would have been the fourth split in a row or the fifth or whatever the hell it is, and that would have caused that thing that you were just talking about. But they finished eighth, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
like I said, I don't
dodged that.
I don't remember the details of it, but I definitely think
Me
that
neither.
something like that should occur with some of these bottom teams, and maybe we might have to wait. The jury's still out on CLG. Maybe they can get it together, and this roster will place high this split. But to me, what's more important is to see continued success, because we did see this from CLG. We mentioned it, 2019 summer, they finished third in the regular season, ended up missing out on Worlds, were the fourth place team by the end of playoffs, but right after that, CLG just kind of went back to being a bottom of the barrel, bottom of the league team, and that's been the same ever since now. This current split where they've started off 4-1. So to me, it's not really about just like that one split where you are successful and you have a decent a team or a decent record. You said it yourself, Golden Guardians, that 9-9 split they had when they had Closer, and that team that got bought up by 100 Thieves. And unfortunately for Golden Guardians, after that split, they've kind of gone back to being another bottom team. So I think that the LCS, they need to start having some conversations, I think, about what they need to do to sort of flip, and I wouldn't say flip the league on its head, but make these bottom teams more competitive, because it does really seem to be that there's the top five and the bottom five. And sure, maybe what we've seen this split so far doesn't point to that, but that's been the storyline of the LCS for the past 3 years now. So,
and it's a very fair criticism. I am in full agreement that it's frustrating to see the bottom half continue to put out these rosters that are uninteresting, and they're not developmental in some cases. Like before this year, CLG was just running back these old veterans that weren't very good. I agree with the frustration there. I really do. I just don't know how practical relegations are. There's a lot, I guess. I'm not totally against relegations. There's just a lot of questions that I have before we bring back relegations. Like in that same feed, people are being like, there should be 18 teams or 20 teams or something like that. And one of the replies is like, so there's like already 6 teams that people don't care about. Now you want there to be 14 teams? And whoever said that, I totally agree. Like now there's going to be 14 teams that people don't care about. Like how do you fix that problem? Or the people that paid their $10 million to enter the league, or maybe more. EG might have paid Echo Fox more than the 10 million or whatever it is. Like what do you pay those teams if they get relegated? Like how do they get their money back? And how much does it cost to join the league now if you're part of the 18 teams or whatever fucking ridiculous number there is? There's so many questions that I have that I just find that it's more the idea is more exciting than it is practical, and that's the only issue that I have with it.
That's a good way to put it.
I would have way too many questions with putting in relegations before I could say like, yes, I agree that we should go ahead and do this. Lots of problems. I mentioned when we started this segment, like, would CLG have been running this roster? Probably not. And that's something that you lose. Maybe EG doesn't even go after JoJo and Danny because they're like, oh, we don't want to get relegated. Let's just take fucking Doublelift and Jensen, right? It's made out to be far more simple of an issue than it really is. It's not that simple. It really just isn't.
Yeah, one, I guess, I don't want to turn this into a debate where it's one side versus the other, but in the case where relegations were to be added back into the league, one thing that I think the LCS back in the day did a very good job when it came to relegations compared to relegations that we see in soccer/football and the rest of the world, where if you're in the bottom, you're automatically relegated, and if you're in the top of the Challenger League, you're automatically promoted, where in the LCS, it wasn't that simple, where there was a tournament created for the bottom teams in the LCS and the top teams in the Challenger Series, and you had to play for your spot in the LCS. And I think that, maybe it didn't get the viewership that it kind of deserved at the time, but I always thought those games and those series were like super exciting to watch teams and players literally, play for their like careers. And
I think there was plenty of hype around those.
Oh,
games,
maybe
though.
I don't recall it, but maybe.
I think that's the reason why this tweet was made in the first place and why it got so many likes is because I think people look back on relegations and be like, wow, that was so fun. And while I completely agree, it was very fun. Again, I don't know how practical it is. And also, like, what is it? It's like one weekend or something of the year. Like, is it really worth stirring up all this shit for one weekend? And maybe the answer is yes, but it's certainly worth asking. Like, how often does relegations happen? Is it once every split, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's another good point. Maybe they sort of
So
change up
there's
the
2
format.
weekends?
Well, I was going to say maybe instead of it being every split, maybe it's every year. Or maybe it's just once every 2 years, and it's just if you were collectively the worst team in the league over a 2-year period, you get the boot, or you have to play for your lives or something like that. So I definitely think maybe how relegations used to work, as you say, isn't very practical to be put into place right now. But, maybe some tweaks are done, or God forbid the league increases the number of teams. Both of us have sort of voiced our negative thoughts about that because we can barely field 10 competitive rosters. There's no shots. There's no shot we're going to be able to field like 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So I think there's some way they could do it, but we don't really know what that is right now.
Yeah, and I love this topic because there are, like I said, I have a million questions to ask, right? I think there's a lot of different ways to look at what relegations would look like, and that's why I love the topic, but that doesn't mean that it's a good idea. And I know we've gone on plenty with this, but I guess I lost my train of thought. What was the other question that I wanted to ask?
I don't know.
I wanted to ask you, J&T, if you remembered what teams were promoted or which teams were relegated, like when those tournaments were happening. Like, do you remember? I remember like Gold Coin or something, or E United.
Yeah.
Were those?
Didn't Dig get relegated back in season 7?
Yeah. Wait, was Renegades actually relegated, or was that
They
just
might
a meme? Was that actually, because people said Relegades and haha. I wasn't sure if that was a meme or not. My point being is like,
yeah,
it's a really big gamble because this conversation proves those teams that got relegated are fucking forgotten. So like you could put all these resources and into a roster and they could just get relegated and it's kaput. That's not exactly a lot of reason to want to invest into a league if you know that all of this can be for naught. That's another worry, right? So again, I love the topic, and there's probably a lot more that we could go on about. We have gone on for quite a while. There's just so many questions with it. Um, I would really love this topic to come up on like Hotline League or something with people that have more knowledge of the league itself, that are closer to the LCS. I think Travis's opinion would be really good on something like this, or even like Monty, for example, would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Those guys.
No, I kind of remember. I think Echo Fox, they got into the league because one of the teams that promoted into LCS got bought out by Rick Fox. So I think it was a challenger team that got promoted into LCS at the beginning of season 6, got bought out by Echo Fox, and like that's why they were Echo Fox. So
I said I was done with questions, but I got one more. Who's to say you would have to make rules about relegations because the one split TL's about to get relegated and they're just like, Doublelift, save us, and then he did. That's another problem with relegations, right? So you need to have rules about who can play and who can't play and what trades can happen.
I have a question.
And stuff like that.
Why is that a problem?
Because
Why can't teams adjust their roster or go sign a free agent to make sure they don't get relegated? That I think.
Yeah, I suppose they could.
Wouldn't you also say that move was like was really interesting and made the league super exciting, and it was great to see TL kind of pull themselves out of last place with Doublelift, and they beat TSM, who are like the #1 team, the week before playoffs. And
but hear me out here. That doesn't mean that it's not fine for TL, but it doesn't, like, the team that loses could have been LCS worthy, but they just ran into the team that just kept them out of the league. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe TL at that point deserved to stay in the league because now you have Doublelift, sure. But the other team that was trying to get promoted can't. Maybe there's going to always be that constant wall of trying to get into the league, because whenever a team that has a shit ton of money is about to get relegated, they just buy Bjergsen, Jensen, Doublelift, or whoever, right? So yeah, that's another issue with relegation, is even if it is fair for the bottom team to go get better players, maybe you had an LCS worthy team that doesn't get in now because they played a top tier LCS team.
Yeah, I guess my question. I guess what I would say to that is, how does a top team end up in relegations and then therefore doesn't allow it?
Because they didn't have Doublelift before. They didn't have Doublelift. They end up 10th, and then they bought Doublelift. That's how. That's how it happened with Team Liquid.
You mean like TL could have been relegated, but since they didn't, they then became a top team. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well,
my problem isn't that bad teams can't get better players. That's totally fine. My problem is maybe that the team that TL kept out, I don't even remember which team it was, that team may have been LCS worthy, but didn't make it into the LCS just because they now played a quote unquote top team LCS or top tier LCS team because it has people like Doublelift on it. That's what I'm trying to say.
I guess I'm a little bit confused because when you say top team, like that TL team was never like a top team. So
I put it in air quotes because you're buying the best players now. Like, you're no longer a 10th best LCS team if you just add Doublelift and you add all these all-stars to your roster.
But I guess I assume you're speaking like in a hypothetical situation, because that TL roster was 10th place and the only move that they made was adding Doublelift. Yeah. I mean, they put Piglet mid and took out Golden Glue, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think, to me, I guess what I would say to that is, yes, while that TL team was really terrible, they were 10th place. They could have gotten relegated, and I think Steve kind of just proved his commitment to wanting to make Team Liquid a good team, and proved that he wanted to stay in the league and he wanted to buy these players and he wanted to be a successful team. And to me, him taking a big risk like that and buying out this player who hadn't been playing competitive league for the last, I guess it would have been since Season 6 World, so like maybe 5 or 6 months, and take a pretty big gamble, ended up paying off for him, and now TL is the team that we kind of know and love for being a top team, and then became Double of Some afterwards. So
I don't want to go in circles again, but I'll just end by saying this big gamble. You took Doublelift. Like, that's a big gamble they took there.
Oh, wow.
But anyways, I see where you're coming from. You're saying there's nothing wrong with a bottom tier team saying, look, we need to get better. Let's get better players. I get that. Okay. I liked that topic. That was fun. Anything else on it before we move on to our predictions for next week?
Yeah. Fucking Immortals needs to get relegated.
Yeah, that's the one where most people have their eyes on. It's like this team hasn't done anything
I mean,
interesting. They don't
I
have
would
the developmental roster even. They
I
have
would also
Kendi.
say that
He's kind of
CLG and
developmental.
Golden Guardians deserve to get relegated as much as Immortals do, but just recency bias
Mm,
would say that Immortals needs to leave.
you know, maybe, maybe. Okay, let's go predictions.
Yep. You're catching up a little bit to me. I took some.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I took some risks, but the risks that you took ended up paying off.
I
And
took some risks.
yeah,
Yes.
but I mean, I don't know if I would classify them as risks. But the picks where you picked different than mine paid off for you. So you're two closer now. The score for the people who can't see what's on screen, it's 15-10 for myself and 14-11 for Blue Jay. First game on Saturday, TSM versus Evil Geniuses. I know that I said that I was getting a little bit of hope back into TSM, but EG, they're still the best team in the league, so EG.
Yeah, I'm gonna go EG as well.
Then FlyQuest versus Dignitas. Your boys, FlyQuest, you're wearing the jersey. Come on, you got to pick them, right?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
don't have to. I could. I think Dignitas is a little bit better still. I'm gonna go Dignitas.
Yeah, me as well. I picked Dig. Third game, kind of a banger here. 100 Thieves versus Team Liquid. It feels like whoever loses this game is going to be in a difficult spot just in terms of their perception, because 100 Thieves would be 3-3 then if they lost, and they're supposed to be a top team, and TL would be 4-2 and have just lost, and would be 1-2 in their last 3 matches, and I don't know, but I'm picking Team Liquid, but whoever loses this match is
Going
going to be
Team
in
Liquid
deep
as
shit.
well. Team Liquid Honda now. We got another new sponsor name.
Yeah, I always
Add on to
I've
the-
seen like all the players on Team Liquid on Twitter now. It says like TL Honda Bjergsen, TL Honda Bwipo, and it's just like, bruh,
Yeah.
sponsorships,
Whatever.
man. Like,
Hey, you know what? So I'm not going to pretend I love to see it because I don't, but I do
don't.
get that esports. You gotta make the money where you can make it. Now I don't think TL has that big of an issue making money. Clearly, they were able to afford the roster that they have, but that's because you get sponsors like fucking Honda and you slap that on your name that you can make the rosters that you do make. So
I just
I
noticed
get it.
Dignitas lost their Quantum Pay. They were Dignitas Quantum Pay. They're not that anymore.
Yeah, what happened there?
Yeah, what happened,
Oh,
bro?
no. True.
Um,
Yeah.
All right, next up, Golden Guardians versus Immortals Progressive. I'm picking Golden Guardians. That shouldn't surprise
And
people.
I will be sad if they lose to Immortals. Next up is CLG and Cloud9. Well, Nolan,
I'm picking
what
Cloud9.
are you doing here?
Thought that was obvious.
Yeah, I'm gonna
but-
take Cloud9 as well. I don't know. You seemed pretty happy with CLG early on. I mean, and so am I. I'm just not that much of a believer. I'm gonna go Cloud9 as well. Although I think this one is actually really close. Which, if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have been like, this game shouldn't be close. So that's good for CLG, I guess. Okay, then the first game on Sunday, Dignitas versus TSM. This, you have to be taking TSM here, right, JT? If you're saying you're bought into TSM.
I'm taking TSM.
Yeah. Hmm. I want Dignitas to win, but I think I'm gonna go TSM as well.
Boo.
Yeah.
All right, next up.
I think this might be the closest game of the weekend, honestly, for me as far as skill level. I think these teams are really close, but I'm going TSM.
All right. Next up, Evil Geniuses versus Golden Guardians. I'll still roll with EG.
Me
Best
too.
team. Then Cloud9 versus FlyQuest. Battle of 2 and 3, but both teams will probably have different records by Sunday, obviously, because they'll be playing the other teams on Saturday. I'm still sticking with Cloud9.
Cloud9.
Then Team Liquid versus CLG. Could be a potential battle for first place. Or tied for first place.
Team Liquid.
Yeah, Team Liquid. Sorry, CLG.
And then 100 Thieves over Immortals. That one's a pretty
Yeah,
obvious pick. Did we have
Immortals
anything
stinky.
different this episode?
Nah, but I was expecting you to pick FlyQuest over Dig, and I was also expecting you to take Dig over TSM,
Really?
so...
I could see why you might think I would take Dig over TSM. Why'd you think I would take FlyQuest over Dig?
Because FlyQuest are your boys.
Just because I like FlyQuest?
Yeah.
I mean, I like Dig too, but yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
You're wearing their jersey,
Okay.
dude.
Yeah. They were fun this past weekend. I felt it was appropriate to wear the FlyQuest throwback. Okay, that's it for the predictions. I'm glad I caught up 2 games because the week 1 was rough.
Yep.
Hopefully week 3 can get me on par. I'll have to switch something up for that to be the case. But then only one thing of quick news, right?
It's not even quick news. I just put it in to put something in there, but I don't know. I
It
thought
is
this.
interesting though.
Yeah, I thought it was somewhat interesting. Apparently, the TSM Legends, which is the sort of documentary series that they've been doing since the beginning of LCS, basically, are no longer going to be doing weekly episodes during the split. So I'm
I
not
watched
gonna
the
get
most
my.
recent one.
Yeah, I
Did
did
they say
too.
on there how often they're going to be doing it?
No, some guy on Twitter said that it's most likely that they're going to be like monthly or bi-weekly. Um,
Oh.
and it's just I feel like this is something that now makes a lot more sense because we've seen the departures of a bunch of high-ranking TSM staff. I don't remember all their names, but Max Olivio was like the head who used to run TSM Legends, which then got passed off to like this guy who was like TSM Andrew or something, and that guy also left TSM like not too long ago when this whole exodus of people leaving TSM was going on. So
Is he 100T Andrew now? I've seen that
I
name recently.
maybe. But I
Okay.
just remember that the people who originally kind of created TSM Legends and have been producing it for so long now just aren't on the team anymore. And unfortunately, myself included, when TSM lost a match or they lost to your favorite team, everybody loved to go watch TSM Legends and see them lose to your favorite team, and that's not going to happen every single week now. And that makes me sad because when Cloud9 beats TSM, my first thing to do on Saturday is to go watch TSM Legends.
That's so like, what's the word? I don't know. I need a wordsmith here to help me out. Does vindictive fit here?
I don't know.
Hmm. I don't know words. But that is funny nonetheless. I just think it's interesting because clearly they don't think that it's worth making an episode every week. So I don't know. Viewership on it must be way down. We know that viewership on the league has been down. I wonder if there's more reasoning to that. They didn't say any other reasoning as to why, or did
Nah,
they?
just some guy on Twitter was saying like they're not going to be every week anymore. Sad. I was like,
Left to speculate again. What else is new? Uh, fine. He says that in his tweet. He says, "I fought to keep TSM Legends weekly all month long, but that isn't going to be the case this split."
well, that sorry to that
Hmm.
guy. You tried, bro.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, that's it for this episode. Not a lot of quick news. I remember someone saying that like quick news was their favorite part of the show. They liked just to catch up on stuff. So
Sorry,
sorry there's
bro.
not that much happening. Or if there is things happening, we're just missing it. Um I guess there was something that happened with Elements or whatever, but I don't really know
Dude,
who much
do
about this
people
guy.
know who, like does the average league viewer even know who that is? Because I barely know who that is.
No, I don't know who it is either, but it's still interesting that it's Doublelift again getting in shit for. He's done like 7 episodes of his podcast, and he's been like so-called canceled twice. No, he's not actually canceled, but there was the whole thing with
Upset's
Fnatic.
wife.
What the hell's his name? Upset and Upset's wife. Yeah,
That's just
like
hilarious.
he's always though. Like I fucking love that podcast because you know there's a good chance there's gonna be some controversial shit.
Yeah, Boy was on
Uh,
it. The boy, the kid.
I know. I loved that. I haven't seen Boy do content in fucking forever. I loved it. Absolutely loved
Doesn't
it.
sound like he's coming back to
S-
league anytime soon, though. However,
I know. I know.
seems
But for those
he's gone.
that like League of Legends podcast, if you somehow stumbled upon this and didn't stumble upon that, or maybe you just forgot to watch it, I highly recommend going to watch it because it's always good content when you got the classic LCS players on there. Highly recommend.
Hmm.
Anything you want to say before we close out the show, JT 250?
Rest in peace, Boy. Not because he's dead, because he's
Yeah.
never coming back to league.
Yeah, gotta be careful about how you say that. Yeah, hopefully we'll get him back at some point. I don't know if he's even still a part of FlyQuest or not, because he had like signed with FlyQuest and then ended up having some issues with the Shinshin and the whole. No need to get into all of it, but hopefully that I hope that he does come back, and I hope that he stays with FlyQuest because I think that's just a perfect match of a team's brand and a dude that just wants to make the world a better place. It's kind of wholesome.
Hmm.
All right. For those that haven't hit the subscribe button, make sure you do that. Remind you guys every week, and they're going to continue to remind you guys every week. That helps us out a lot. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the comment. And we will see you guys next week, same time. This has been episode 90 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Take care of yourselves.